questions through the Zoom chat, and we'll make sure that those are answered throughout the presentation or at the very end. So Jake, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I will. It was great. I'm glad I got a chance to kind of listen in. I love all these ideas of different things to kind of mix it up. I think lots of leaders, and myself included, are looking for new ways. So I jotted down a few notes. We did a wine tasting where we had a sommelier, and like they ordered specific wines, and it was a fun little event too. So there's some good ideas. So thank you again. As mentioned, I'm the CEO of SKALED Consulting. We're a sales, consulting, and strategy company based here in Austin. We relocated from New York. We still have our office in New York. We've got about 30 people. We focus primarily on helping organizations optimize different components of demand generation, sales, and account growth. So, we're not a sales training company that comes in and does, 1 or 2 day event. We're the company that you hire to kind of come in and fix things. So, I will let Tiffany do a quick high level on plan view as well too.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. So again, Tiffany Giddens, I'm the head of global sales development. I have 22 reps across the globe, from Stockholm, Sweden to Australia, to the majority of them based here in Austin, Texas. So PlanView, we're a global leader in portfolio and work management solutions. So essentially what that means is our company and our solutions allow you to take an idea all the way through to fruition and delivery. So whether it's keeping it on budget, on time, we really kind of have that, we help our customers really take on that transformation journey all the way through to making sure that they get stuff delivered on time and as well as on budget. So very high level, we have quite a few solutions within that portfolio, but I'll keep it at that.
Love it. Love it. And if everyone wants to drop in, I know we did some intros before I joined. It didn't show up for me in the chat. Maybe just drop in, job title and company, just so we can get a sense for just level of people. If we've got more senior level individuals, more people on the front lines looking to make things happen. I always find that's helpful for me. Please drop in questions. We've got an hour blocked. In reality, I think be very selfish during this time, try to get very, very specific and, about your organization, what you're going through. And I think we'll try to, kind of open the dialogue as much as possible to Q&A. I love Q&A personally. So, we'll try to make sure that we take as many of your questions as possible. So Susan, thanks for sharing, advisor at Insperity. So again, everyone, Yulia, appreciate it. Again, just share in there your role. So again, we can try to make this more, tailored as we get through this. So, and again, I think, I'd love to hear your take on this too, Tiffany, but, I think for me, whenever we talked about this topic, right, which is the concept of investing in your people, I feel like a lot of people look for the kitschy stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they look for like the ping pong tables, even some of the things, that we're talking about, right? The happy hours, which are all fun, which are all important, right? Ping pong tables, unlimited time off. But what does it mean to you, Tiffany, when you think about investing in your people? We talked about some of these like engagement activities, but what is that? How do you bring that to life in your org in the day to day?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I do have, considering sales development is a very young in your career type of role. Some of them do love that ping pong table. Not gonna lie.
Of course they do.
So, but then at the same time, what it truly means to me being in this role and working with SDRs for as long as I have, it's helping them with their growth. The SDR role truly is like a stepping stone type of, they want to go into sales or into marketing or that sort of thing. So that's why I've been working with SDRs for as long as I have, because it's really spending time with them, coaching them, getting that one-on-one time. All my reps like to say I have a little bit of street cred because I actually was an SDR, so they listen to me, but it's really, for me, quite honestly, it's just getting to spend time with them.
Yeah. So again, like that time of like showing up, to where they know that you're invested in their success. Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's such a key component of this, that I think, especially right now, we talked about, like, I like the gong show that's going on after this, that someone mentioned. I think that now this becomes even more critical, that, there's so many things that are happening behind closed doors, right? People are, dealing with so much more than they've had to do with just kind of mentally than, they're used than kind of the usual pattern, right? Which was you wake up, You go to work, you hang out, you get all the stimulation from the office, you have your meetings, you maybe have, again, hang out, talk to your peers or whatever that might be afterwards, or have some type of conversation. Whereas now, the mental well-being of your people too, I think it changes a little bit. And I think it's, having kind of more frequent, conversations maybe, than you're used to around like just how people are doing. And and not just like casual, like, oh, hey, how's it going? But like, what we started doing is, and we've kind of, this is driven by, not by me, but other people, is, just reaching out to individuals and just doing like a virtual coffee, a virtual lunch. And like, you both just kind of take off lunch, but you have Zoom on, or having like a 1-to-1 beer too. I feel like these are the types of things that are, really just trying to invest in the human and really trying to understand kind of where people are at right now. And maybe kind of a follow-up, how has that's how I've seen it manifest, but how has that changed for you? Like, have there been new things for you around like new ways you're investing in people, thinking more about like that 1-to-1 versus the 1-to-many?
Absolutely. And I've had to, because since I do have so many reps globally, I mean, it's, I'm one person and that's a lot of people. And I get that things are also heightened right now, so we do our standard team meetings, and then I'm fortunate enough to have 4 team leads. So they're always, coaching and reaching out as well. And then I rotate my one-on-ones at the same time. But kind of to your point earlier, I had a lot of my EMEA team has been on their annual holiday, right? And so they're all back yesterday. And so we had our EMEA team meeting yesterday. We did not talk 1 second about business or anything. We literally spent the entire hour totally unplanned, but just going, what did you do? How are you doing? That kind of thing. And like, just almost having like an early morning Zoom happy hour, like just saying, hey, I miss you guys. Like, I legitimately don't know when I'm going to be able to get back over to Stockholm to see them, So we did not talk one thing about plan view, one thing about like, okay, you're back, let's get motivated again, or anything along those lines. It was really just catching up. And I think that, again, totally unplanned, but I've gotten more feedback from that meeting yesterday than probably any other meeting I've done. And I think the other thing is that we've tried doing that's really key is not necessarily just hearing from me, but hearing from their peers. And so they're all really good buddies outside of the office. And so they have these little collaboration teams that they connect with. So I think those are a few of the things that we've been doing that I've noticed has worked. Yeah,
I love that. It's just, it's like, that you miss all of that serendipity time, from those 1-to-1s, et cetera. And so it's, you have to be purposeful. And I think for a lot of you, I mean, just from my take, is like a lot of times as a leader, sometimes you can take some of that for granted. But I think now, and as we go forward, I mean, because this isn't going anywhere. And I think that that's a really important mindset shift. I still feel like there's a lot of leaders that are just kind of like holding on, waiting for things to happen. And in reality, like for the next 6 to 12 months, like we're not going back. And so I think a lot of this is about either doubling down on things that have made you successful during this period or before. And again, maybe just like to your point, expanding some of those times. Whereas before, maybe the small talk was just the first 5 minutes. Now being okay that the relationship, right? The relationship and the trust is the basis for any business relationship.
Exactly.
And they've got to believe that you care. And we were kind of talking about some of this before, but really, what we've seen is that there's really kind of these 3 things. And what we're going to do is we've got kind of 4 points, and Tiffany and I are going to kind of go back and forth and talk a little bit about it. Again, I'll monitor the chat for questions as they come in. This is great. We've got some different folks jumping in here, dropping their questions. We've got some HR, we've got some corp marketing director. Love it. So I think that these are a lot of the things that are important, right? Purpose and fulfillment, feeling valued, open and safe communication that really people are looking for more and more. And it's not that this isn't something that people cared about from before, but it's certainly something that I think now is more important than ever, that, people are feeling kind of a different, level of isolation, a level of, insecurity or different emotions than they're probably used to feeling, that when your home life and your work life is kind of on top of each other, that I think, part of, as a leader now, I feel like it's really on us to be aware of that. And it's on us to, help people through that. Whereas like you said, talking about like financial goals and things before, I feel like there's a new level of kind of mental well-being. And Tiffany, I don't know if you feel this too, but I know I definitely feel this. Like in July, for example, I mandated that everybody had to take 2 days off consecutively. I'm like, you have to, because I feel like people our people aren't necessarily being as cognitive of their like mental load because they're just working, like I had somebody who's working like 2 a.m. consistently. I'm like, no, like you like whatever it is, like, let's just sit down and work through this, because that infects everybody. And that makes other people think that that's like a new norm. And I feel like so many people are working more and more. So, like, how are you thinking about with your team kind of and maybe a new layer? And whereas before you always cared about your people, right? But maybe now having to be more on the lookout for like just kind of being sane and being like mentally, like
so
healthy.
Now, absolutely, yeah. And I think our executive team did the same thing as you. They gave extra days off over the summer, and I think Leslie, not to like steal anything, I think they're going to announce a couple more days off at the all hands tomorrow. But so our executive team sees it as well, and I think for the frontline managers like myself, it's just constantly checking in. We have several tools that actually allow us to do that, so I can kind of take a pulse. My biggest fear is,
what do you use, Tiffany, real quick before you go on? What are the tools you're using?
Yeah, we use 15-5.
Cool. Yeah.
So we're able to give high fives, and then they have the weekly reviews and everything, and everyone's really honest about that. And that helps me keep my pulse in case my biggest fear is missing something that's not right, something that's wrong. One other thing that I've started doing, and it's super simple, but I never did it before, and I don't really, maybe because I was actually having to commute into the office, but while I'm having my coffee in the morning, I just hop on Slack and check in with my EMEA team, because they're still working. My US team isn't quite up yet, and going, but just doing like a quick check-in. Hey, I see you got that deal yesterday. Awesome job. Or hey, how's everything going? Just little stuff like that. You don't realize how far that goes. And so, sometimes I'll do that, and then all of a sudden I'll see a Slack that's like this long and be like, oh crap, we
need to talk.
Let me take my leader hat off and put my therapist hat on, kind of thing. So yeah. I definitely feel like there's been, throughout this whole situation, we've talked a lot less about numbers and a lot more of just like how we're doing, and just making sure, because I feel like if they're doing well mentally and everything, they're gonna be successful. This is still definitely a tough road, but if they have that, if they feel like they have my support, which I'm pretty sure that they know they do, and they're feeling good and everything, they're gonna be more successful. I don't need to hammer them on how many calls they're making or anything along those lines. It's I look at it a very, very different approach. And luckily I'd always looked at it that way pre this. So we kind of moved straight in, and it's just heightened at this point,
I think that's such a great call out. That's right. I mean, if you trust that you hire smart, capable people, right, and you invest in training and making them successful, and then you invest in them as a person. These are things that, again, when I grew up in leadership, when I first, joined leadership, these are things that were, I think, instilled. But I think, look, in any type of performance job, and you probably see this in other, not your peers necessarily, but other leaders, it's really easy in marketing and sales and other roles to get focused on the non-work stuff. And especially during COVID, where like your company may or may not be in a good spot, right? And that adds this level of pressure at the leadership tier, because you're feeling the heat from above, trying to shade it from the people below. And that can be, I think, a difficult rub from time to time. I thought this was an interesting stat, again, just about like, how much more productive, happy, motivated employees are. I think this is something that a lot of people kind of know intuitively, but, again, it goes back to it. I think one of the things you talked about, having more meetings that are just more about, hey, how are you doing? And, how do you kind of keep that going? How do you make sure that these people are happy? And I think like what you said is so spot on. It's those kind of pulse checks. We implemented a tool called Small Improvements, which has some kind of pulse survey functions. And so, we've really been leveraging some of that too, to, every 2 weeks, there's a couple of kind of series of questions that we ask, but really what we're looking at is a couple of things. It's, how well do I know kind of what I'm doing or like what my job is and how I'm doing, and also how tied to the mission and values am I? And we really feel like, you know, if someone is disengaged with their role or they're not feeling tied to the mission and values, and it's all anonymous, but it gives us just a pulse on the company. And it really gives us a pulse on, you know, hey, are we doing a good job of keeping people engaged? Are we doing a good job of making them feel, you know, kind of a part of the company? Because, you know, sometimes, like you said, it's like, it starts with like micro slips,
right?
You know, like with the individuals. So we're going to talk about these 4 areas. And like I said before, please, you know, if you have any questions, comments, let me see if we've got anything that's kind of started to come in yet. All right. So we've got some questions already about kind of remote communication, some of like the specific challenges. So I think we can try to thread some of this in here as well. So we're going to talk about kind of these 4 areas, right? Feedbacks and one-on-ones, outcomes over volumes, a personalized approach to employee comms, and adaptable. And so we'll kind of dive in, and Tiffany, I'll let you kind of like get started here with kind of feedbacks and one-to-ones. But some of the things that we pulled is that, you know, look, managers are the most important group that influences employee engagement. And I think a lot of you know this, right? That you're frontline leaders. To me, the thing that I find shocking is just how little we're investing in managers. Meaning, if you look at a typical organization, you know, you do all this stuff for frontline people, all this training, and then your managers, you're like, ah, yeah, you know how to do the job, as opposed to like all the different things and the skills that we're talking about now about, you know, empathetic listening and these types of things. So managers are the most important, you know, people. Again, when you think about engagement, right? Employees are 3x more likelihood to be engaged at work if they have managers who hold regular meetings. You know, and people, again, 46% want more positive feedback. So half of people are wanting more positive feedback from their manager. And I think, and you know, Tiffany, I'll give you my 2 cents. I think right now, one of the most important investments, and I'll tell you something we did at we're doing actively, is we went and hired a leadership coach for a lot of our frontline managers. And so we've got a session now where they're meeting with somebody every 3 weeks. They're doing, you know, we're doing group sessions every 2 weeks on the people and investing in your leaders, because I feel like the amount of investment I see consistently in leaders is almost 0 to way too low. And I feel like now is, look, if you want to think about like the feedbacks and the quality of the one-on-ones your leaders are having, we have to invest in leaders. And so I'll give my kind of take on this too, but you know, what are you all doing? Because you have 4 team leads now. So you've got your 4 people, and then they're, you know, making it happen with the frontline people and your spot checking in. So, you know, how are you kind of supporting your leaders during this time, you know, and working with them?
No, it's definitely a great question, because it's not easy, right? I mean, it's something that we have to constantly, for me, quite honestly, it's transparency, you know, and just like what I'm hearing from my leadership team needs to trickle down. I don't want anyone, I feel like when you are working at your home, like your mind gets racing, right? Like, oh, what if this, or what if that, or, you know, like, so we've been really pushing with the communication. We've also done something similar with our leadership group, you know, from a Sandler perspective, having a Sandler coach come in and like train us on true leadership. And that started back in January before all of this. And so we definitely, as we were going through our monthly meetings with him, have shifted the focus on being, you know, empathetic. And, you know, at first, our first meeting in January was more about like, how can we get more results, right? Like that was the whole point of sales leadership training. And it has completely shifted to, you know, how do we know that we're there to support our team? One thing that, and I will just be completely transparent again, is, you know, my team leads were taking on way too much. It was too much pressure for them. I mean, they understand I'm in a lot of strategy meetings and that sort of thing. But I mean, I had to have a very big heart to heart with, you know, for instance, my EMEA team leads are like, no, we can handle it. We can handle it. I'm like, no, that's not the point. We need to handle it together, you know, like make sure that we're there to support one another. So, I mean, they were trying to take it on, you know, all their own. And I'm like, no, you still have a quota to hit too. Don't forget that, you know, we gotta be in this together. So I think that's key. And also one of the big things we've done is having team lead meetings, which we've never done before just because of time zone differences, but we figured out a way to make it work. And man, Jake, I don't even have to be in that meeting. I feel like I just sit back and let them just go, what about this? What about that? And it gives us a lot of ideas, and it's just really collaboration, because a lot of what's happening in, say, Stockholm is also happening here in Austin. You know, it definitely translates quite a bit when you're all in this global pandemic that we're in together.
Yeah, I think that that's like a critical component. And so it sounds like you all have done that as well too. You've started to make additional investments in the frontline leaders, again, and also focus on the soft skills, right? And focus on, like you said, empathy and listening versus like, you know, how to run a more effective pipeline meeting. And I think that goes back to some of the themes that we're talking about. And these are candidly some of the things that I hope stay, right? What I hope is that, you know, whenever I, you know, moved into leadership in the, you know, mid 2000s, I was fortunate enough to work for a company that's big enough to where I went through leadership training. And so I learned some of these things, like how to have a goals one-on-one. Like I don't think I would have intuitively figured out. I'm supposed to ask about, like, figure out like if someone's trying to buy a house or something like that, and I'm supposed to help. Like, I don't know if I would have figured that out intuitively. And I feel like, you know, what I see, especially in our little tech world, is that the amount of training that is going into frontline managers is atrocious. Mm-hmm. And what you're hearing from both of us is like, that is your leverage. If they can have better if they can give better feedback, they can have better one-on-ones. You see all the stats here, right? About how much more effective. So I feel like, you know, we've got to take some of this mindset shift from COVID. I know, you know, we're actively working on it. You're actively working on it too, Tiffany. So I think hopefully a lot of you, kind of a big takeaway is invest in your frontline leaders, you know, invest in, and then, you know, kind of as it trickles down, it's investing in kind of the relationships with the people, you know, at the one-on-one and the frontline level. So I think that this is a really big and kind of important one, that remember, managers are the linchpin. You know, whenever we do big change management engagements with, you know, mid-size or even global, you know, big global companies, we already know it. I was on a call with a big global company yesterday, and, you know, they were talking about their plans. And I was like, look, if your frontline managers aren't involved as the linchpins of this, it's never going to work, because they're the ones who have to drive this home. They have to reinforce it. And so I think for a lot of you, just really start to think about, you know, how are your frontline leaders doing? You know, what are you doing to invest in them? Because to me, that's one of the biggest areas of leverage. And what's kind of sparked you to, you know, invest back in January? Like, what was it that you saw in your business to where you were like, you know what, like, I need to do more for the frontline leaders?
Yeah, actually it was our executive team that made the call, knowing that, you know, we have quite a variety of, you know, we have some, you know, frontline managers that have been here for upwards of 20 years, right? And then I'm coming in my first year at PlanView. And so there's definitely a big mix of different types of managers. And so kind of just wanting to ensure that we built that foundation was the whole key of, you know, our teams support one another. My sales development team, it's, you know, their customer is ultimately our account executives, right? And so like we need to make sure that we're on the same page in order for our teams to be able to operate at the same page as well. So I think that was a big thing for us.
Love it. Love it. And so the second thing, and I've talked a lot about this, and I'd love to get your kind of like quick take on it too, is the idea of, let's see here. So we've got some people sharing some stuff. All right, great. So good. Keep the questions coming, everybody, as well too. Some of the questions around, you know, managing remote communication during COVID challenges. So I think we can dive into some of this. I think we can talk a little bit about managing versus coaching too. This is a big one that I get quite a bit about, or quite a bit of kind of detail over. So for me, this is a big one I've been pushing, is that what I feel like has happened, and you're and obviously as a sales dev leader, you might have some very strong opinions. So we might have some dialogue here. Is a renewed focus on outcomes. That when you think about investing in the people, you know, sometimes in marketing and sales organizations, we tend to, and I say this with all love, be a little lazy. And what I mean by that is we come up with a median or a mean number for activities and for MQLs or whatever, and we manage everybody to the middle versus focusing on outcomes, which is I'm supposed to produce 6, you know, meaningful conversations or 2 meetings a week or 5 meetings a week or whatever it is. I feel like one of the unintended consequences, as we've almost, it started with predictable revenue in the late 2000s and it's just perpetuated since then, is we've had this kind of over focus on volume of activities and more. And like and I see this with a lot of sales dev teams, and I'd love to know, I want to get your take on this, Tiffany, that the number one lever they have is more. It's like, hey, we're not hitting our numbers, great. We're going to do more power hours. Hey, we're not getting our numbers. Hey, we're going to have a blitz this week and we're going to do more. And as opposed to, how do we just drive more outcomes? Like, I feel like there's a lot of laziness in marketing and sales because the problem is like kind of this second stat, and why I had Becca pull this is like, the more button only works for a period, to where people are like, dude, enough. Like, I can't take this anymore. So how on your team do you think about the combination of outcomes and volume and activity? Like how do these relate for you? What are some things that you do?
Yeah.
And I really feel like this helps to keep people motivated when they feel like they can bring more than just okay, thanks, Tiffany, I'll make more dials today.
Right.
Like, how do you kind of think about success and outcomes for your group?
I've always been the anti-volume type leader. I'm not your quintessential SDR leader in the sense of like smile and dial, or, like have this auto dialer that just drives all of us crazy, with that sort of thing. So we've always led with thoughtfulness has always been my key. Quality over quantity when it comes to what we're doing. For instance, we have a sales play running right now. And yes, we have tools like SalesLoft that can automate our emails and all kinds of stuff. But we're not doing that. We're being more strategic. We're going after the person knowing, hey, we can actually help you. And so when you shift it, in that regard with my team, I want my team to understand we're not just doing this to get a certain number of meetings or a certain number of SQLs. Yes, at the end of the day, we have goals to hit, sure. But in order to get there, there's 2 different roads. You can go with, I'm going to send 5,000 emails and annoy the crap out of everyone. Or I'm going to send 10 really awesome emails and make some really great phone calls and be like, hey, Jake, here's how I can help you. Like, are you having this problem? We're seeing this problem out there. Here's how we can help you, kind of thing. And so when you shift that, luckily that's kind of the way I've always led. Pre-PlanView, I was at a security software company. So talking to people that deal with security software all day long, you gotta be strategic. You gotta be thoughtful. They're not gonna give up the farm, right? So that's kind of, what I brought to PlanView as well is you're not going to find an auto dialer with me. You're not going to find, yes, we do have some automation in the background.
Sure, of course.
Our cold cadences and stuff, but ultimately it's, I want my team to understand that we're here to help our customers and help our prospects. So I think that's when I shift it like that and make sure that they understand that, you look at far less emails, far less calls being made, but then more productivity, more outcomes. And it just works that way. I had our head of ops come out to me 2 weeks ago, I think. He's like, you guys only made like 300 calls last week. And I'm like, yeah, but did you see the numbers we hit? Like, come on, like, the proof's in the pudding. So that's kind of how I operate. I always have. I've never been like, you can't leave until you make 50 dials kind of person at all. So. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah. And I think for a lot of you hearing that, and same thing with marketing, I think marketing can suffer from this too, about like more MQLs. Like, my friends, an ebook download is not an MQL, right? I attended this webinar, right? It's now not like all of a sudden all of you are qualified prospects for SKALED or for PlanView, right? Like, it just doesn't work that way. And I feel like what happened is we got all these tools where we could track a lot more than we've ever been able to track before. And for some reason, and I know what the reason is, right? I've heard the mantra, right? If you can't track it, you can't master it. I think there's a version, and there's other flavors of this. It's just not true. There's a lot of things that you can do. Like, if I like or comment on a LinkedIn post to build affinity with a CEO or CFO, again, I can go manually log that. I could build it into my SalesLoft cadence but also it's like, or I could just do it. I could just, because that's like the right thing to do, and it'll maybe give me a higher likelihood of booking a meeting, and then you can track me based on outcomes. And so I think for a lot of people, I think we've got to be smarter about how we go back, because the more button one, and you're seeing this, and I don't know, not how you've seen this, but, some of the stats I've seen, Tiffany, are like 50 to 60%, 50% of SDR teams are hitting numbers. Sales dev teams, 60% are hitting numbers. And I feel like it's because of the tools and that we've just focused on volume and we've kind of started to remove it. And I love how you talk about it, which is like, no, we're just trying to get outcomes. And if people have a problem that we're doing X, Y, Z, and we're producing outcomes. But I'm sure you see this, what do you think causes it for marketing? And because I know you've talked to your peers, et cetera, and there's a lot of people who do not agree with what you and I are saying, or there's a mix. But how do you have those conversations?
Yeah, luckily here at PlanView, I have a lot of support. My head of sales, he actually kind of has that same mantra. He got on our team call the other day and just talked about like business and getting into, like how businesses operate and businesses work. And so we've really pushed the dial on, just having those type of conversations. I mean, our head of sales, obviously he's been, around the block quite a bit compared to like my 22-year-olds that are straight out of college. Right. So hearing someone like, here's how I broke into Exxon or whatever it might be, that type of thing. And it's kind of having that thoughtfulness in your back pocket. But yeah, at the same time, I mean, look, we had, when this all hit, we had budgets get cut drastically. We were humming pretty well. We had a really good team. We had quite a few people still ramping, but we were hitting our numbers pretty good and pretty consistently, which was great. And so when this hit, it's like the brakes hit for our outcomes. And so that's when, again, I had to put my therapist hat on more than my leader hat and say,
right.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. Like, we're in this together. I don't know how many times I had to say that. We're in this together, like as a whole team. Like, it's not just one little territory that's being affected, right? And so we've really had to kind of get creative. And it's been a lot of fun, quite honestly. We've tried a lot of different things to get creative to still have those outcomes. But, when we saw people weren't willing to get into a sales conversation with our AEs, we asked our head of our solutions consultant team, hey, will you just come hop on the phone for an hour every Thursday? And it's super informal. We use my Zoom link and we send our prospects and they get to go talk to our head of solutions consulting, which they probably never would have gotten to speak with until they were way further down the sales,
sure.
pipeline type thing. So we tried different stuff to kind of keep us motivated and keep us going. And again, be thoughtful in our approach. I think that was, that's been the key for us.
Be thoughtful in your approach. Everyone write that down, right? To me, that's the most important part is that I just feel, I was talking to a sales dev leader, gentleman, Kevin Dorsey. So we were talking over the weekend and the amount of thoughtfulness, is it more difficult to set meetings today with the send all or like the basics than it was? Absolutely. Like, I feel like now you just, the cleverness, and which I think is a good thing, right? Like, yeah. Guess what? That's what AI can't automate is clever.
Yeah. Yeah. We're having some fun with it. We've started using more LinkedIn video, that sort of thing. So that's the key for my team is I've been pushing them to try different things and to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. And they're actually having a lot of fun with it, which has been great.
Yeah. And like you said, although they only did 300 dials last week, they, had an amazing week from a performance, and that's it. Right. Again, those are things. If I send a 1-to-1 DM on LinkedIn, you can't track it. Now I can log an activity against it or a task, or if it's in the cadence, I can say that I completed it, but it's not auto tracked. Right. So I think these are the things that a lot of teams are struggling with is we know that these activities and these clever things can add value, but we're so torn because it's not easy to track. Sending an email, easy. Made a phone call, easy. Other stuff, harder, right? Sent an in-mail, which, we can get into that later about versus a 1-to-1 DM. There's just a lot of opportunity right now, again, I think to unleash creativity. So this kind of gets into some of the things we've already talked a little bit about. So the other piece, again, when you're thinking about investing in your people is a personalized approach to employee communication, right? When you think internally delivered, wherever and whenever they want it, incentives and challenges that spark their personal interests, easy to navigate tools. And so you've talked a little bit about that. And we had a question here that I think is a good caveat. What do you feel like internally for you? Challenges in managing remote and this type of communication, maybe some things that you've overcome or are still struggling with. I'd love to hear that. as you think about, hey, here's some things we're still working through to do this internally, as well too. So again, this kind of personalized approach, like maybe some things that you're doing and maybe some challenges you've had with the kind of remote versus in person.
I would definitely say one of the biggest challenges that I have had over the past 5 to 6 months now is my reps that are straight out of college, right? They don't have that confidence yet to really speak up in team meetings, and so we're trying to empower them to really be more proactive and get in the middle of it. But at the same time, given the 22 reps that I do have, I have some very loud senior SDRs that are just never going to give them a second, kind of thing.
Right.
So that has definitely been probably one of the biggest challenges is, like I mentioned earlier, I have two that I just recently met in person for the first time, and they've been working for me since like April, right? So they started remote straight out of college. I mean, that's unheard of. If I were to start straight out of college, now tell me what I would be doing. I started at Dell, so I had a very, systematic approach. So, there was no getting, being remote by any means back then. So I think that's probably been one of my biggest challenges is just my younger reps and just ensuring that they're really getting it, I feel like in person I can tell that they're getting it, and I can spend more time with them in that sort of way, where I've had to kind of switch how I really listen to them and try to take their Zoom body and how they're really talking to me. It's something I was always able to do in person, is oh, she was telling me one thing, but I got the feeling it was something else. I've had to relearn how to do that, virtually. So luckily for me, I've been, in a global capacity for quite some time. And so I'm used to a lot of the remoteness of, working in Europe and stuff, but that's been very challenging. So again, I think I've mentioned it earlier, but what we've been doing is, in order to help our younger ones find their voice, I've been putting them with the other younger ones. So they're all talking together, and they're all my one guy from Australia, he might be 22, but he's going on 55. He is a fireball. And so he gets all of them on a phone, and he's treating all of them like they're his little chickens, it's really cute. But I've noticed that has kind of improved their, their comfort zone, if you will.
I like that. Yeah. So again, it sounds like more peer-to-peer, encouraging some peer-to-peer. I love that. How do you, with these groups, and then again, giving the like you said, the older folks, the opportunity, older as in 24,
exactly,
the opportunity to feel more mentorship. So it sounds like more peer-to-peer. Again, you talked the same thing about your team lead, and we're trying to do that with our internal scorecard meetings as well too, to where the leader's not driving it. It's maybe somebody else who's driving it. And I think that's when you go back to maybe some of the things we're talking about here, a personalized approach to employee comms is, I think maybe the theme here is, it's not just about top down, it's side to side too. And that, when you think about maybe a difference in the way that content needs to be delivered today is, instead of just boss driven, more and more needs to be kind of peer driven, and giving people those opportunities. If you think about some of these things, the qualitative, I just got a question here, which was, how has your communication changed so things don't get dropped? Right. I think there's also, because, we're using email, Slack, maybe a little text message here or there, a little phone call here or there, are there things that you're doing around this kind of personalized communication, or how you're interacting to ensure that, you're still hitting a high level of, honoring commitments to each other, not dropping balls? Are there things that you found that have really worked?
Yeah, honestly, it's, in order to keep me honest, is utilizing 15-5. So I can actually say, okay, send a note here, send a note there, just keeping me honest, because like I mentioned earlier, one of my biggest fears is that, I can't, what if I am missing something, right? And so it's just keeping that pulse, but it really helps me stay up to date. We also do stuff like the positive feedbacks, giving high fives on the 15-5, and that back and forth camaraderie and stuff. One thing you mentioned earlier, it's kind of off your question a little bit, but The other thing that we've been doing is actually empowering our team, not just my team leads, but to work across teams with others. So we kind of practice what we preach. We are fully agile. So we do PI planning. Now we do virtual PI planning, and so within our marketing team. So instead of me having to join all these strategy meetings and everything, my senior reps, I say, hey, will you go to this meeting for me? Or how about you take on this part of this role? So I have people that are part of just one go-to-market team, and they join every single meeting for that go-to-market team. And they're able to give that SDR feedback and be like, hey, y'all tried this one other time. It didn't work. I'm telling you right now, so they feel empowered. And that's kind of, I think that really has boosted them, as well as give me more time to do more one-on-ones and more, feedback sessions. And so it's kind of a win-win for us all. So I think that's been a big win for us during this time.
That's super smart. I think that's something that almost everyone could action, right? Is just go look at your calendar right now. I guarantee there are meetings next week that you don't need to be in, that instead you could empower someone else to go help support or run or,
honestly, it's better for them to be, I'm not on the phone. You don't want to,
of course.
Back. Like they're the front lines,
Yeah, they're like, Tiffany kind of gets it, but let me tell you, like the real, like this is like what's happening. So the last thing we're going to talk about is being adaptable. And I think we've talked about a lot of different strategies here. And I think we've all had to, look, we all have had to adapt. I think some have been more aggressive at it than others. And we've seen this across, the portfolio of the companies that we work. And, we work with probably 20 to 25 companies at any given time. And so, we've seen companies that adapted and made hard pivots and are like having some of their best quarters ever. And we've seen other companies that haven't. We've seen other companies that, and I'm not necessarily talking about the companies that are in really hard hit industries, right? Hospitality, et cetera. Companies that were in industries where, maybe other people are thriving, but they're not because they just didn't have kind of an adaptable, mindset. And so when you kind of think about, that, how do you, and again, we're even talking about some things that I think go into building an adaptable organization, but are there some things that you guys do to always be adapting and optimizing? Because one of the challenges I see with sales dev orgs and sales organizations in general, even marketing actually does a better job of this around paid, because we're so used to having an always performance mindset in paid. It's like we shift ad dollars here, but in sales, I feel like we move so slow. Like we'll look at the sequences or cadences that we're working every X period. We'll make some changes. We'll look at our sales cycle every year or whatever it is and make some changes, as opposed to having a faster mindset. I feel like COVID has kicked this into gear where we had to, right? We had a team where their CMO, their sales leadership, this is like early April. They sat there over a weekend, pulled out all 60 sequences, rewrote, and then re-uploaded, because they had to. Yeah. And I feel like, how do we keep this mindset? Because I feel like sales needs to be more adaptable for forever now. And so what are some of the things that you do to make sure that you're optimizing, make sure that you're always adaptable, and make sure that the organization is continuing to stay, we all have to do it a little bit now. It's kind of forced, right? But like, how do we do it going forward?
Yeah. And I think it's also, how do we do it in a very quick manner going forward? When
right. Exactly. But the bureaucracy bullshit, right? Of like, oh, I've got to go check with this person before I change this thing or whatever it is. And you're 100% right. That is probably what slows so many orgs down, is that mindset of like, oh, well, will I get in trouble? And will Kevin have a bad reaction to this? And let's see what mood he's in today or whatever it is. And just go make, you're seeing what's working. Like you said, your people, like, just go make changes. Yeah. So how are you tackling that now and thinking about it maybe as we look even into 2021?
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of ourselves because we just flat out did it. I told my boss, that our CMO and our head of sales, who I basically dotted line to as well. I was like, I'm going to try this. I went, here's the feedback we've been getting. Here's what I think could help us. And they're like, go do it. You have our support. And that has been huge, is knowing that, oh wait, don't do that so quickly. There has been none of that. They're like, just go do it. And so we kind of operate on the notion of like, if you're going to fail fast and, and go on to something new. And so I think that's probably quite honestly one of the reasons why I came to PlanView. I had worked with the CMO, at prior places as well. And he really empowers, myself and our peers to like, hey, if you feel like something's not working, go, and you think this might work better, go do it. And I have, empowered my team to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So with that first week of us being on quote unquote lockdown or whatever, when all the offices closed,
Yeah.
or whatever, I had one rep, and I mean, one of my newer reps, he wrote an entire cadence about, working remote, what that meant for him, that sort of thing. Before the whole remote working and all the Zoom, everything took off, he was like 2 weeks ahead of all of that, which is amazing considering he's straight out of college. And so we just went with it, and we were able to get some fairly quick meetings during a very hard time, because I just tell my team, like, if you think something's right, let's go try it. It's no harm done if it fails.
That's right.
Don't do anything crazy, but like,
most people won't, though. That's the funny tip. Most people won't. People aren't just going to like fire off emails that have F-bombs in them, right? Or fire off like completely stupid emails. And that, like, same thing with like, people producing content on LinkedIn. It's like, I feel like there's so much of like, oh, we don't want them to do this. Like, people aren't dumb.
No.
Like, there's a very low likelihood they're going to actually do something that's going to like really mess something up.
Something that they're really proud of, which goes back to everything we've just talked about, and like, kind of just, empowering your people. And so when they're proud of something, guess what? They're more productive.
Absolutely.
So I think that's been the key for me, is that we have an enormous support system here, to where they really let us say, okay, go try it, Tiff, but if it doesn't work in a couple of weeks, you're going to adjust it. And I'm like, if it doesn't work next week, I'm going to adjust it. Like, let's go try it. And so that's, and we're going to keep operating that way. Luckily we have been on our PI planning and that sort of thing. So we've always had that focus, which has helped us make adjustments, but then we can go ahead and make adjustments during the PI as well. So that's been very helpful.
How do you deal with it? I just got a DM a question here, which is around, what if your org isn't like that, right? And I think there's a lot of companies that, here's the first thing I would say, and maybe I'll take a first stab at this, is that I feel like most organizations are. I feel like it's a mindset issue with a lot of people, that there's one of two things that I see a lot of, and then you can take the real hard line case when they don't do it. But here's what I see is, one, people bring ideas bundled in a pile of what, and expect someone else to magically wade through it and figure out what you're actually trying to do.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of the times when people don't get what they want from senior leadership, or they get from even if their peers or their boss, they take it as like somebody's not open, versus like, maybe I just packaged this really bad. Like, maybe I didn't like make my case. Like, life is sales, life is selling in concepts, selling in ideas. And I feel like sometimes the reason that people think they live in a culture where people aren't as open is that they actually aren't putting in enough work or diligence to make the idea even viable. And I feel like that's a lot of individuals that I've seen in organizations. They just have a mindset of like, well, it's their job to figure it out and give me all this leeway, et cetera, as opposed to making it really easy for someone to say yes. And I think I realized that very early in my career. I'm like, okay, Evan likes to see things this way. So if I package it like this, I get whatever I want, and I feel like that, as opposed to just like taking this like ho-hum, my orgs, doesn't want innovation, which I see people, and then it's like, that's just not true. And so, how do you, that use case aside, what do you do? What do you do when it is more difficult?
I came from a company that it was difficult. It was a much older company, very large and very, difficult to operate. And quite honestly, probably not the best answer, but I just said, I'll ask for forgiveness. Like, because here's the problem. Here's what I think the answer is. Can I put this in play myself, or do I need others to help me? And if I do need others to help me, can I go sell it to them and then put it in play and be like, look, here's what we did. It is more of a bull in a china shop type mentality. So you definitely, kind of like you said, you can't like say, here's my problem, now you go solve it. I have to say, here's my problem, here's how I think I can solve it, now let's go do it. What annoys the crap out of me, especially having 22 direct reports, is when someone tells me that they have a problem and I'm like, well, what's your idea to solve it? Well, I don't know. Like, that is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like, if I have a problem, let's see if I can think of the solution and then see if I can put it into play. So probably not the best answer, but that's how I've kind of always.
I think it's the right answer to that would have been mine. It's like, do it and ask for forgiveness later. What's the alternative? Fail in a vacuum, fail in a silo. Forget that, man. I'm not going to sit here and fail.
Is someone going to, fire me for trying? Like, I mean.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's it, is that you have to try. And I think the key is like, and then, or you put in a little extra elbow grease. What I mean by that is like, what I would do when I was on the front lines is I would go to my boss. I'd say, look, I know what you need from me. I've got to do this minimum stuff. I'm going to do all that, but I'm also going to do this. And here's the deal. If I can do this and prove this, I want you to let me go do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And so I found that to be a very effective negotiating technique of like, look, whatever your minimums or whatever it is that you needed me to do, we're still going to do that. But I'm also going to do this thing. And this is what I want to test. And if we're able to prove this, then I want to mix this up. Are you open to that? And most people are logical and will say yes. And so Jess actually asked a question about, suggestion for how to package ideas and best practices or package things. What I found is, this answers for Jess, and then maybe you want to answer it, Tiff, and we can wrap up. For me, I ask the person, what do you need to see from me to make this a no-brainer? That's the question that I'll ask. I'll go to my director, my VP, my CEO. Look, John, I get it. There's some, what are the things that you need to see to make this an easy yes? Well, great. Okay. Well, what if I can do these two? If I can do these two, as opposed to, I think other people start throwing spaghetti and they guess. I don't have time for that.
No.
I just go ask.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's what I would say too. You just straight up ask. I mean, if you think you have the answer, you go ahead and package it up. That's what I did when, kind of taking, the SC office hours idea, for example, or whatever. I would send that to my boss and our head of sales and say, okay, well, how about if we look at doing it this way? And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I mean, obviously the idea is already a winner. So now I just have to go facilitate it and make sure it works. Mm-hmm. And so since I had it pretty much packaged up the way I liked it, I mean, all it took was our, Jeff and Cameron to be like, just change it just a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I guess I got the idea, like win.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So that's it. It's that, it's up to you to adjust to and that's where it just becomes, I think, as you move up in your career, managing up becomes just more and more part of the role. And absolutely. once you see the patterns, I saw stuff, kind of, it was like, I remember we used to have these account reviews at Career Builder where the AVPs would come in and decimate these sales reps, with their account plans.
Oh yeah.
And but the formula is actually pretty easy to crack. It's like, who are the other people that need to be involved? Do you have a plan to go meet with them? If you just did this stuff, then people are like, yep, that's it. And I'm like, how do you guys not see this? Just like
go have a full account planning template. If you don't fill that out, you're probably going to
just fill it out. Right. And then when you get lit up at 8:30 a.m. in a hotel in Nashville, you know why. So, all right, everyone. Well, look, follow Tiffany and I on LinkedIn. I hope all of you had a lot of amazing takeaways here, from the conversation. Definitely. I know I enjoyed it. Since you're here in Austin, we'll have to go grab a coffee or whatever you do in the next period here.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
I enjoyed it a ton. Thanks everyone. Thanks ATC. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to hit Tiffany or I up, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks everyone.
Bye guys.
Hope you all enjoyed that. It's some great information. Feel free, if you would like to email us with any questions. The email is info@austinTechnology.org, and this recording will be on YouTube pretty soon. So thank you again. Have a great day.
Thanks everyone.